Welcome, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today with you. As Charlotte said, I'm going to be talking to you about metrics in the context of journey management. It might not seem like the most interesting or exciting topic, but it's a very relevant topic. I've been having a lot of conversations with my customers on this. There's a lot to be said about metrics, so we are going to be scratching the surface, and I do invite you, if you have any questions or you want to dive a bit deeper, to reach out to us or to the community after this call. We are always happy to have more of a deeper chat on this topic with you. Maybe a bit about myself. I'm a customer success manager at TheyDo. I've been with TheyDo for around a year and a half now. I'm based in Belgium, so I'm working mostly with customers in Europe, but I also have some accounts outside of Europe. I've been working as a customer success manager for more than 10 years now. It is my great passion getting to work with a lot of different people from different organizations. Getting a peek inside all of these different companies is what drives me. This is the agenda. So as Charlotte said, I'm hoping to have a bit of interaction with you. It's the end of a long Thursday, so it would be nice to get some responses from you and not to have to send the entire session. I'll have some nice prompts and questions for you. We'll start the meeting with a bit of an icebreaker question. Then I'll talk about the common challenges I see when it comes to metrics and journeys, why having metrics in the context of a journey matters. How do you go about finding the right metrics, how to align on them across the different teams, and then we will wrap up, and I have some next steps for you, and we will leave room for Q&A. I mean, if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to just jump in and ask. I really don't mind mixing it up a bit. Perfect. So this is my icebreaker question. If you could keep from all of the metrics that you're measuring today, and I'm assuming you're already measuring some then, from all of these metrics that you're measuring today, if you could keep only one to measure the success of your customer experience, what would it be and why? And just feel free to drop the metric in the chat. You don't need to come off mute per se, but it would be nice to see some metrics. Oh, okay, I see revenue already coming in. Retention, that's a good one. Loyalty, okay. Customer lifetime value, CSAT. Nice, I'm seeing a mix of different things. Time saved, that's also a good one. CSAT again. Nice, I'm seeing a mix of different things. Time saved, that's also a good one. CSAT again. Nice, I'm seeing a nice mix of CX metrics and more business related metrics. Progress from Pernil. Yeah, good. Thanks, guys. That already gives me a bit of an indication. Is anybody open to explaining to me why? And I'm thinking about some of the business metrics like revenue, retention, time saved. That also interests me. Why would that be the key metric for measuring customer experience? No reason. You're going to leave me guessing. Okay, that's fine. We can revisit later when we have a bit of a deeper dive.
If you want, I mentioned retention.
Nice.
I think that loyalty is more important. But as retention, if we start lower with retention, we can predict profit growth and loyalty also. So, and retention includes a lot of other metrics as churn, satisfaction, and so on. So there is a lot of insights about retention. That's why I kept it.
Perfect. Thank you, Anna. I fully agree, by the way. That's a great metric. Great. The good news is, so when we're thinking about what are some of the challenges that we see when it comes to deciding on metrics, the good news is that most of the CX teams, according to Forrester, around 64% of them, are measuring journeys already. The downside to it is that in many cases, teams are defaulting to what we call satisfaction scores. So they're just measuring outcomes, they're just measuring the satisfaction, and we're missing a part of the information. When I speak to my customers, what I notice is that it's not necessarily a case of lacking data or not measuring things. So most teams are drowning in data, but it's unclear what to focus on, what to action on, and how to use that data and how to visualize that in the context of a journey. What I also notice is that often business KPIs tend to be pretty disconnected from the journeys that we're measuring and mapping. And what I also see is that sometimes we put a lot of focus on what we call vanity metrics that don't necessarily tell the right story or that help drive change, instead of focusing on the meaningful insights that will help us really understand what's happening. I have Marjorie asking for an example of vanity metrics. Depending on how they're used, metrics like NPS without much context could be considered vanity metrics, because there's many different ways in which to measure and present an NPS score, but without some business KPIs tied to it or the right context, they could be considered a vanity metric. And then Chris made a response. It's not just the one metrics, but really the connection between the various. Absolutely. It's never just the one metric. It's a combination of different kinds of metrics. Most of you seem to be already measuring things. One of the challenges is that not every metric is as valuable as the other. This is a bit of a cheeky question, and I'm not going to ask you to elaborate on this because this is being recorded. But I am curious to know if there's one metric that your teams are currently reporting on that you secretly think aren't that valuable, but nobody dares to stop measuring it or raise it as a subject. You could just drop it in the chat. I won't name any names, but I'd be interested to know if there are any such metrics being measured right now. Yeah. Okay. Me personally, if anybody would like to know, for me, NPS tends to be one of those metrics. Yeah. Okay. I already have some people in my team. Yes. Yeah. It's not always easy, because what I notice is that some of these metrics can be carried quite highly in the organization. It's what's reported on, so it's difficult to change it. Another strategy, and we'll talk more about this, is to make sure that we can tie these metrics to other more business KPIs or other metrics that can have more impact or can give you more context to why an NPS score is what it is. Maybe a bit more about why it's important. Why are we having this discussion? Why is it important to have your metrics in the context of a journey and to have these different kinds of metrics in there? Important, I mean, this is often said, but a customer doesn't really experience your org chart or the different departments that build a journey. A customer just experiences a single journey with your organization. A lot of the metrics that are used today are still tied to some of the silos. So think about marketing, tracking leads, operations, tracking efficiency, CX tracking NPS. And none of these metrics are bad metrics per se, but they are tied to specific silos. And it helps to have some journey level metrics as well, to make sure that the teams don't just end up working on optimizations or items that benefit their silo and don't necessarily benefit or improve the entire customer experience, or might even damage it in some way. And having these journey level metrics or having a thorough conversation or discussion about which metrics to start tracking can help you evaluate whether a journey in the end delivers value both for the customer and the business. It's a combination of both. Having these journey metrics in your journey, they can help you do a number of things. First of all, they can help you identify early on where friction happens throughout the journey by using these signal metrics, for example. This will help you assess if customers might end up achieving their goals, or if maybe something in the customer journey needs to be optimized or can be improved. What it also does is it helps you create sort of a common language for all of these different teams to communicate with each other, to collaborate, and to help you prioritize the right initiatives to work on and to make the right trade-offs consciously rather than based on gut feel or accidentally, basically. So this is a way to help you prioritize the right things to do. Any questions at this point, by the way? Everybody still with me? Okay. There's a lot of different ways to find the right metrics. It's also, in my experience, not that hard to come up with metrics. I see many teams having all of these brainstorms. What are we going to measure? And coming up with a list of items or a list of with items to start tracking isn't that hard. However, our advice would always be to start small, keep it simple, and focus on those metrics that really bring value, that will help you tell a story, and that can help you drive change within the organization. And an important distinction that I like to make is that between signal metrics and success metrics. You can kind of compare that to leading and lagging indicators, for example. A signal metric is an early indicator. It's a signal that can help you identify early on throughout the journey, so it can be measured throughout the journey at different touch points. It can help you identify areas where there might be an issue, and they signal whether a customer will end up achieving their goals or whether there might be an issue with achieving customer and business value. So you measure it throughout the journey. You have success metrics. That is usually measured at the end of the journey, and that is about whether or not your customer has achieved their goal, whether they're successful, and whether the business values or the business goals that you've set have been reached. Think about achievement, satisfaction. NPS is an example of a success metric, and then signal metrics. You can think of other things like abandonment, channel switches, complaints coming in, drop-offs, things like that. This can seem a bit conceptual, so what I've done is I've collected a few examples from you from 3 verticals that I'm working with in my customer base. I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but you can review them in the deck that we'll share after the call. But I've included some examples of signal metrics and success metrics for government, insurance, and pharmaceuticals. I think most of them you'll recognize, and you can more or less apply them to your own situation as well. But so for signals, think about abandoned applications, for example, for filing an insurance claim, people dropping off, or people having to go through forced channel switches for government agencies, for example. Success metrics, I think of total number of claims filed, approval rates. In pharmaceuticals, it could be adherence and satisfaction. Those are kind of the metrics that I usually think about when I think about signal versus success or leading versus lagging indicators. Seeing all of these metrics and thinking about the different things that you could measure. One thing I always like to ask my customers as well is if tomorrow you could start measuring something, if you could magically add 1 metric to your dashboard that you don't measure or that you aren't able to measure today, what would it be? So you can, again, drop it in the chat or come off mute if you would like to share a bit. But I would be curious to know what you would like to start measuring. Doesn't necessarily have to be related to customer experience, could be something else. A hard question. Oh, in-store product engagement and abundance. That's a nice one. Brand health. I see how experience indicators tie to finances. That's a good one. That's also something I would like to measure, the correlation between these experience indicators and then other key metrics. Yeah. more targeted measurements of friction rather than just overall. Nash, would you like to elaborate on that? That's interesting. I also have Erin asking if experience indicators are honest. It's a good question. What % of respondents hate the surveys? Task completion times, time from first search to purchase, and then any KPIs for physical products we can't see as easily as digital products. Yeah. Okay. I have the feeling we have some people from retail here, which is interesting. Is there anybody who would like to elaborate a bit on their response?
I can elaborate on mine. I mentioned task completion times because we're B2B2C, so we've got end customers, but we've also got agents supporting customers on their own like UI. So we want to know like, you know, how long is it going to take to kind of like support a customer with a specific task? And then like, can we reduce that cost to serve metric overall? Like, what are the opportunities?
Nice. Thank you. Ron, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I am from retail, so basically the entire brick and mortar experience, we really can't understand it and measure it the same way we can with digital. So that's things like, you know, even wandering times in aisles. Did an associate help you or not? How often does that happen? And then the product pieces that are mentioned is just very low insight, and we have to stitch it together.
Yeah.
Directionally.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you try to do that now, actually? Like, what tools do you have at your disposal to sort of get a view on that?
It's a great question. Some of it comes through just reported through CSAT metrics that we can, things like engagement with an associate, or we have to do things manually that's not real time. So things like targeted insight work for customers that are leaving a store and asking them if they did or didn't purchase and why not. So it's a lot of different manual methods and not real time.
Yeah. Far from ideal. Okay. Thank you. Anybody else that would like to share?
I can share. I said brand health because
Yeah.
sometimes retention is alone does not also works. Sometimes we retain clients, but they are like terrorists in our brand. They are committed with us, but not for the right reasons, let's say. So everything that has to do with the customer perception about the brand will help us to understand satisfaction, loyalty, overall sentiment, and working more in depth on, let's say, more quantitative metrics.
And are there any other items or things that you can measure that could together form the brand health score, perhaps? Or are there any indicators that determine this brand health?
Well, it depends on. I work with brand. I worked in the past with a lot of brand health projects. It depends a little bit again on the organizations what they want to have there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but basic, and it's not a metric by itself.
Yeah.
I would say it's a lot of contextual information about what is what conveys brand perception overall. But we could work on several image aspects
Mm-hmm.
and relate them with the competitors. Usually, we draw a map with those aspects, working in what is important to the clients and how satisfied are they with those aspects when experience our brand and competitors' brand. So this is more complete, and we can see the distances between what customers want, what we convey, and how far or how close or how equal are we in terms of competitors.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing, Anna.
Okay.
Great. You have your metrics. You know what you want to measure. You've had a thorough discussion about what it is that you'd like to start measuring. Now you need to make sure that this is aligned across teams. Why is this important? Often teams bring their own yardstick. Product measures adoption, CX measures satisfaction, operations measures cost. But the customer in the end only experiences one journey. So how do we make sure that everything gets aligned? And why is it important to get everything aligned? Because if we don't, we run the risk of every silo or every team just focusing on their piece of the puzzle, optimizing there, but not necessarily looking at the entire customer experience and improving it end to end. We need to make sure that we tie the metrics directly to both the customer value and also the business outcomes to keep it relevant, and to make sure that we avoid some of these vanity metrics that don't really help drive change, or not necessarily, or maybe not avoid, but not just to focus only on the vanity metrics, making sure that we keep the KPIs relevant and actionable. How can we do this? There's a number of ways that we can create this alignment across teams. The first option that we have, obviously, is map your journeys collaboratively, ideally in a tool like TheyDo, of course. Why does that help? Getting everybody together around the same central journey, making sure that everybody's looking at the same thing, getting all of these stakeholders together and using the same language to communicate really helps at focusing on what needs to change. Defining journey level metrics, not just departmental KPIs. You can have your departmental KPIs in your framework, obviously, but also think about a few journey level metrics to make sure that you're reflecting on the end-to-end experience as well, including both customer and business outcomes. And then very important and often overlooked is establishing a metrics governance process. Having a governance process in place means thinking about ownership of these metrics, who's responsible for keeping the metrics up to date, communicating about them often and transparently within the organization, and making sure that whatever solutions are being pushed to help improve these KPIs are tracked and plotted against these metrics, basically. When we're talking about alignment across teams and making sure that everybody's talking about the same things, what are, for you or your organization, the biggest challenges in getting everybody to agree on this? Again, come off mute or drop it in the chat. Some of the challenges that I've seen so far is organizations being, well, is lack of data, lack of access to data, for example. That is one thing in getting the right metrics. Not knowing what to focus on. Oh, okay. Tracking the journey across different devices. Oh, no, wait, I'm still. No one can complain that the prior reference to data was a shameless product placement. I'm sorry, this is still a TheyDo coffee chat. Business versus UX metrics. Our teams don't own an end-to-end journey. They own a slice. That's a very good point. Lack of executive sponsorship. That's a good one. Yeah. I would like, Adriana, would you be open to elaborating on this a bit? The lack of executive sponsorship?
Yeah, sure. We meet this kind of problem over and over again. Sometimes during the project, we emerge with shared metrics between different areas involved in the customer journey, but in the end, this doesn't get implemented because sometimes this metric doesn't travel beyond a project. I'm a consultant. I'm part of a live work, a consultancy. And so I think that's it. I think it's perhaps lack of implementation. It doesn't permeate into the operating system of the companies. And a lot of it is because most of the projects we work on, perhaps they are conducted by middle management or senior medium management, and the C-level is not directly involved. So it kind of dies on the way to the C-level.
Yeah, that's a great point. Do you have any strategies on how you usually handle this kind of situation?
I think from a consultancy point of view, I think what we can do most successfully is during the sale of the project, the commercial phase, put some premises for the success of the project, etc. I think it needs to be a conversation, an early conversation. It's difficult to, when you start rolling a project or a program, it's very difficult to involve people who weren't in the loop later.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I can share maybe some best practices that we use here at TheyDo. So we start this discussion even in the pre-sales process. So as soon as an organization is interested in working with TheyDo and they enter like the sales process, we start the conversation on the business challenge that they're hoping to solve, the key KPIs and metrics that are involved, and we need executive sponsorship. So this is something that we work on with organizations even in a prospect phase. We try to get clarity on which use cases they want to start with, what are the business and customer outcomes that are related, so that by the time they sign and we start onboarding, we have a full overview of who's the executive sponsor, what are they being evaluated on, what are the business KPIs that we need to reach, for example, so that when we start with journey management and we start building that first journey, we can drive value faster. And this helps because when you have that first value to show, it's easier to then roll out to the rest of the organization and to basically convince other teams to start working with these journeys or this new way of working, basically. Thank you, Adriana, for sharing. That's a great example. Rosie, you also said that your teams don't own end-to-end journeys, they just own a slice. How do you handle that situation? Because that's the case in many organizations that I work with. Yeah,
it's tricky because our journey management isn't mature enough for metrics at the moment, so we're still trying to figure out how to bring them in. But end-to-end metrics are kind of negotiated almost between teams at the moment because no one owns the end-to-end journey, and it would be a lot simpler if we had teams that own the end-to-end, but in the reality is we're not there. So I think we need to kind of almost like broker deals potentially between teams to agree on some of the metrics, but it's something we're yet to overcome. We're not there, but I'd love to know if anyone else is kind of like, you know, further along that journey than we are and has achieved like any kind of big wins or something like that. Oh, interesting, Ron. Would love to hear more.
Well, maybe a little similar to you, Rosie. We're still very early on adopting both journeys, understanding experiences, and journey management. So I sit in a centralized team within strategy. And I'm in a new role, which is looking across the end-to-end journey. But a lot of the challenges you mentioned still resonate. We don't really have a sponsor who owns, you know, what are the KPIs that really matter. We have a smorgasbord still a little bit. And then Rosie, to your point, we're still identifying how do we even think of our journeys and how do they fit together. And so we're very early, but I even see the messiness, you know, and you sit at the end to end, it's still hard getting that alignment as well.
nice. Thank you, Ron. We also have people struggling with not having the data available to track the metrics they want, so they have to resort to metrics that are easier. Does that resonate with anyone? And would anybody like to discuss that or have tips for that? I'm wondering, Nash, if not having the data available, is it because it's not being measured or is it inaccessible in the organization? You can just drop it in the chat and we can revisit later. Daniel, you're talking about misaligned objectives. I'm wondering, this misalignment, how does that come about? Is there anything you can share about that?
Hi, Brian. Sorry, my camera was off. Well, different functions. When you have business and products trying to agree on metrics, they come with different heads and different mental models, and it's really challenging to walk in the other shoes and to build internal empathy around the so I think OKR is one of the good approaches for these, but also it requires some kind of organizational maturity that not everyone has. KPIs are much more immediate, if I can say it this way. So aligning on objectives is usually where I feel that in some organizations the struggle is. And I'm also elaborating on the other ones is the different levels of data maturity, because sometimes the analytics are within the department are the only ones doing the reports and the only ones working with the data. And so you don't train your people to increase data literacy and use the raw data and try to play around a bit. So you always like safeguard that it's always like a process that you need to ask for a report. So I also don't think that helps. And the conflict of but that always exists in all organizations, long-term goals or KPIs and short-term, right? We build and ship the future and we want to measure and assess it some way. And so the day is finished, we just work this amount of hours, right? So we are many times on operational metrics, trying to see if what we just launched is working, if the customers are replying to the new offer, and we missed the long-term goals, or they are just assessed annually or something like that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Anna, you raised your hand. Would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, I was talking in one point that Daniel also mentioned, that is metrics or data literacy. Sometimes the organizations are very, do not go through the metric itself. And the NPS is one example. We use it a lot, everyone. I'm not talking about the company where I'm working with, but everyone uses NPS, but NPS by itself doesn't tell you nothing also. It must have a benchmark to compare. And of course, that is NPS property owners' responsibility to promote it. But sometimes we are looking into our bellies, and we are going in with this and not go behind. I'm going just to give you a very short example how
Yes,
this
please.
could affect brand levels. I live in Portugal. I'm Portuguese. I live in Portugal. Portugal is a very small market, as you know, country and market. And we had for more than 20 years audience panel that was built and promoted by one company, and that is very known in Portuguese market. And every brand that you can imagine that is represented in Portugal bought the panel. But some people, more academic, found that the sample of the panel, and the way data was being analyzed was not the most correct one. So they opened, it was like a commission, an audit commission, and they opened to every company that wanted to present a new proposal, a new project, a more comprehensive project. And they choose a different company, but clients still continue to buy the other company data because they were used to it for more than 20 years,
Yeah.
even if it was wrong. So you see, we need also, or the agencies or the commissions or the associations, we have market research associations, also have a role to promote um, literacy on what we can do with data.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's also because the question came earlier about vanity metrics. What are vanity metrics? A lot of times we're measuring things without actually understanding what it is we're measuring or the context in which something is being measured. So whenever you're thinking of building out a journey and attaching some metrics, I would always urge you to have a thorough discussion about what is it that we want to track, what will help us tell the story, and how can we combine it with qualitative insights as well? How can we combine it with whatever the market is giving us back, basically? Any other questions about this topic at this point? Is there anything else somebody would like to share? I can see that Erin also posted that she'd had trouble tracking when a large organization has brand activations, promotions, etc. Yeah, yeah. Erin, would you like to elaborate on that a bit? How you're handling that situation? Because I agree with you, like it could affect higher level strategy. Yeah.
No, I just feel very strongly that there's more on the table here, that picture is coming along with programs like TheyDo. But I feel that metrics is really the common language that both the business side and the experience side can lean into. And I think that's just this is a great discussion. So I have no magic wand, so to speak, but I do have a lot of interest in supporting each other in the effort.
I think that's thank you, Erin, for sharing. That's an excellent point. I think when it comes to being taken seriously and helping drive change, where CX teams have often struggled is the fact that they've had these metrics that were maybe kind of vague and fluffy sometimes, which is why we at TheyDo, when we're working with our customers, we put a lot of focus on having these business metrics in there as well, making sure that you have both sides of the coin, because this will help you communicate with your business stakeholders who you'll need to free up time on backlogs, for example, to build solutions for you to help you drive change. So it is a common language that you can use to communicate, basically. I made like a very brief recap and some guiding questions that can hopefully help you a bit. I think it's important, again, as I stressed before, that not every metric deserves your full attention, basically. I would focus on those metrics that will help you guide your decisions and that tie back to both customer and business goals. I always tell my customers to start with known gaps or goals. Look for areas in your organization where there's strategic goals, where you know that there's pain both for the customer and for the business that you can help solve, where there's a clear gap that could use some improvement. If you start there, you're definitely going to get the business's attention. Always combine qualitative signals with your metrics and your operational data. Look at complaints, look at feedback surveys. If you're building out a journey, having both your metrics and your qualitative feedback there is very nice, because whenever you have a number there, you can immediately drill deeper and try to see the bigger context, what's actually happening or what's your customer telling you about these numbers. And so tie it back to business and user goals. And some guiding questions when you're working with your teams on what metrics to start with. What decision will this metric help us make? Is it a signal or an outcome? So you know where to place this. Is it at a journey level or is it throughout the journey at a certain touch point? And is this metric telling us a story or is it just making us feel good? And if it's just about making you feel good, you can still keep it, but maybe combine it with another metric that gives you some additional information. Are there any questions for me or for anybody else here in the call at this point? Anything that I haven't touched on, maybe, that you'd like to discuss?
Yeah, thanks, Ellen, for sharing this and love the engagement in the session. And as you mentioned, we still have a few minutes to open the floor for your questions now in return. So if anyone has questions for Ellen or for a broader community or wants to share their experience so you can help each other in your journey management efforts, feel free to chime in. So let's see if anyone has something on their mind.
People are either still getting
Sure.
started. Ron, go ahead.
I'll
Thank
ask
you.
one. This might be a
Thank
dumb
you.
question, but I'll ask anyway. I think the one, as I mentioned, we're still new in defining our framework and starting to build it out. I think the one challenge I've had when you think about the overall end-to-end journey, do you define KPIs or metrics at each stage or just overall? Because I could see value at the stage level, but then I understand there are overall KPIs too. So I just didn't know if you have a perspective on that.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It's definitely not a dumb question. You can do both. My response to that would be, first off, it depends on who's going to work with these different levels of your framework. Who are the stakeholders who will make use of them, and what would they like to see at each level of the framework. But we combine journey level metrics with stage specific metrics, and then depending who the stakeholder is and on which level you are in the framework, they can be more or less tactical or operational. But we definitely have both, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks. I hope that helps. Anyone else?
Let's give it a moment. But yeah, I think if there's no more questions, we can be mindful of the time and we can wrap up here. But yeah, before we go, thank you for going on the second slide. We would love to invite you to our next coffee chat with TheyDo. Yeah. That is happening in 2 weeks on the last day of July. It will be hosted by Rosanna, our senior journey management coach. And some of you already met Rosanna in the previous sessions in the community, so you know she always brings sharp insights and a lot of practical value to the session. She will be talking about what it actually takes to move journey work forward and share some practical lessons from the field. So make sure to register via link in the chat that I just shared, and we will also include the invite together with the recording in follow-up email tomorrow. So yeah, Ellen, huge thanks for sharing your insight on metrics with the community today, and of course, thanks for everyone who joined and contributed with their questions, comments, and sharing their experiences. And yeah, that's it from us, and we hope to see you at the next one.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. And thanks, Charlotte, for having me. Have a great evening, day/day all. Bye.